Welcome to the You Go and Get It Girl podcast, a platform engineered to inspire girls and women of all ages to follow in the footsteps of high-achieving women in business, entertainment, and sports. A living reminder that you can't stop a go-getter. Go-getter, noun, defined as an aggressively enterprising person. A go-getter knows they can have any life you want. You can too, but you have to take it. You have to go and get it. We hope to help you do just that. Here is your host, Kurt Richardson.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the You Go and Get It Girl podcast. If you enjoyed the success of the first few episodes, we had 1,000 views on Jennifer Justice's first video, so we appreciate and support that. Not sure when you'll be seeing this, but we would love for you to like and subscribe. We want to be part of your journey, the understanding, either as a dad, a girl dad, or a father, mother, sister, whatever you can do to advance and advocate young girls and women of all ages to really understand what some of the high-achieving women do to get where they're going through. And today we have one of those people. So as with always, we have the CEO of the Richardson household and business extraordinaire as well, Angela Richardson. And today we are joined by Lily Kaplan from Imagine Entertainment. Hello, Lily.
Hey there.
Lily has a famous apartment now. There's no two ways about it. So she's joining us from her world famous apartment. If you Google her name, you'll learn all about that. But we're happy that you joined us. Our goal is always to just quickly meet these people that we have access to and share a little bit about their stories so that girls and women feel empowered that, you know, I grew up and I would see men doing stuff, and it never occurred to me that that's not what happens for my daughters. I have 4-year-old twin daughters. I have a 26-year-old daughter. My joke is I've been having kids for a quarter century. I have a granddaughter as well, but they don't live in a world where it's changing, luckily, but they're not seeing themselves represented the way that I saw anything possible, even though I grew up in a tough situation. So thank you for joining us from Brooklyn.
Normally the Upper West Side, but I'm actually joining you from the Cape Cod, Massachusetts. But thank you for having me.
Another theme we're seeing. So we had Fire Island, we've had the Poconos, you know, East Coast. There's a lot of good living out there in the summer.
True, it's true.
So I want to make it really simple for us. Like, Lily has been part of the development team at Ron Howard's Imagine Entertainment. She helps people tell their stories. If you look at her IMDb, she does all kinds of roles. Like, you didn't just land on what you're doing now. So we'd love to kind of just get your background on you're growing up. Are you thinking you're going to be in entertainment? I mean, now you're working on things that win Emmys. Like, you're working for this great organization that is putting out great work. You guys are up for, I think, 8 Emmys right now as you and I are talking. So good luck and congratulations on that. But could you tell us, like, how does this happen for Lily Kaplan?
How did it happen for me? Well, I always had an interest in film and creative writing. And so when I went to college, I was lucky enough to go to Barnard College, which is, actually a women's college. So there was that empowerment factor there. And I studied English and film and did a lot of internships because Barnard was in New York City. So you got great access to different directors, producers, publications, magazines, all that kind of thing. And then I graduated college and went into the mailroom at United Talent Agency. And the mailroom gets a lot of, what was that?
I couldn't love that more. We're really
excited. Yeah, it's where you start. It gets a bad rap, you know. You see Entourage and you think that that's the stereotype, which is partially true, but it was actually really, really fun. You learn how to do a lot of things, a lot of small tasks that maybe you assume are silly or unnecessary, but they're really what makes the business go. So that was a blast. And then I worked on a theater literary desk. So I worked for an agent who was representing different writers, playwrights, directors, producers, that kind of thing, which was pretty thrilling. Got very into New York theater, but ultimately wanted to work in documentaries. So from there, I went over to HBO to work in their doc division. At the time, it was sort of the last reign of Sheila Nevins, who had been the president of HBO Docs for a long time. And that's where I met Rudy. And I worked for an amazing woman named Sarah Bernstein, who was producing tons of documentaries that I had been watching and a big fan of. And HBO was really great, and I would have stayed always. But Sarah got tapped to run the docs division for Imagine Entertainment that was newly being constructed by Justin Wilkes, who also runs it now. And Sarah brought me over to be the development exec. And I've been here ever since. And now I run development, and it's been a very exciting, busy time.
I love that. So there's a couple things that are themes that we see, and we're trying to get people understanding. The reason we want to do this is I'm learning, like I said, that the world didn't look to my daughters the way it looked to me, where you're seeing all these people that, look like you or have similarities to you that are in these high positions. And then also we talk about the whole idea is you can't stop a go-getter. We believe, with Rudy and myself and just our crew of friends that we grew up with, we believe you have to go do it. You have to be a participant in your success. So I love that you literally started in the mailroom and that you're enthusiastic about it, because sometimes people look at the process like, oh my God, Lily has developed Emmy-winning shows, but it wasn't always that way. Everyone has the start, and getting people interested in making it sexy to start at the start, I think is one thing we definitely want to talk about. But other than that, you mentioned women's names, one we're trying to get to talk about her journey, but I love that it's women that have opened the door for you. And I'm wondering, when you're at Barnhart, are they telling you like, hey, Lily, that's great, you have this dream, you want to be in film, but film doesn't always there's a lot of men who work in film who hire men that look for the same things we're talking about. They hire their clones and proteges, and that's how it ends up, especially in writing and production, ends up all men. Are you aware of some of the challenges as you're going through this and you're getting passionate about your career?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, a place like Barnard is so aware of the challenges because it's kind of what built them, and they're very proud of encouraging how to overcome them and conquer them and make you unafraid of them, as opposed to going into the working world thinking I can't do it. You really leave thinking I can do it, which is probably scary for the people who hired Barnard women, but it's exciting to be one, because I think that it's pretty hard to ignore the challenges. I think we work in a really male-dominated industry, and there's a lot of nepotism, and to your point, people bringing in the people they know. But I've been really lucky to work for women who have been able to kind of show me the way. Actually, every boss I've had has been a woman. I work for a woman and a man now simultaneously, but it's been really nice to watch the women above me navigate this. And I think the industry's changed a lot, and I think they had a really hard time too. And you have to be incredibly tenacious, probably go out of your comfort zone a bit to be outspoken and communicative and advocate for what you want. But when you see people around you doing it, it's incredibly inspiring, and it makes you think you can do it too.
I love that.
Yeah.
Lily, what would you say the advantages are of being a female in development and storytelling?
The advantages are probably just having a unique experience and a unique perspective, because I think we still live in a world where the default perspective is probably that of a man. So drawing from any experiences I've had as a woman, feed into whatever creative I'm making. And I think also being able to collaborate with other women and sort of talk about how we see something, which might be, it might be the way everyone sees it, but it might be a different angle. It's very rewarding.
I love that. Such an interesting thing, and part of what we want to do is capture that and make girls and women feel better about their POV. Like that point of view it's most people aren't thinking about the world the way that you and I are, that we understand TV and film and cinema and entertainment dominate so much of the psyche of our culture, that they're not realizing that they might have watched television shows for 40 years that are all through the male perspective, and with a minimal or minor role of the female perspective. As you're going through, we always ask people about their education and how they would change it, and not just formal, but I bet Barnhart really prepared you for one of the things we talk about is like, were there moments where they talk to you about a specific thing and it comes up and you're like, oh, thank goodness I have that in my back pocket as a point of reference? And if there are, like, what are some of those things where you experience this journey from the mailroom to, executive, and are there milestones where you're like, oh, I was prepared for that? Or were there things that caught you off guard? Like, hey, Barnhart, one thing I would change is add this in.
Yeah, well, I think no education can really teach you how to live in the working world. You sort of just have to do it. So I felt really prepared from Barnard for a lot of reasons, but I think mostly, and this would be, accessible at any type of education, it was really my English major. I mean, I majored in English, and people joke that English majors go nowhere because they don't lead to a direct path. But honestly, they teach you how to close read and write and analyze things very sharply. So I think throughout all of my experiences, I've been incredibly grateful that I have those written skills, and I can read things and look for different meanings. And that really comes up in most creative jobs, honestly. So that's been incredibly beneficial.
That's cool. When we talked off camera about just people bringing you stories, but obviously there's a right way and a wrong way to bring a story to Lily, Kaplan, and Imagine. But when it's the normal process, somebody's coming to you and they're bringing you your idea. Are you first and foremost accepting all that idea, or does it trigger things from your creative past? Like, oh, they don't even know that that's a thing that could be a theme, or they don't even see around the corner. We've had some insight with Rudy, kind of telling us a story he's going to tell and why he's going to telling it, and then we get to see it on HBO, which is amazing. But when you're in the room, are you noticing that people are bringing a story and they don't even see the story yet, and you're able to help craft that, or how does that work?
I think it depends. I think a lot of people who are pitching us are seasoned filmmakers who do can have the ability to anticipate the story before it actually materializes. But I think also at the same time, there are people who see the potential, kind of see the access to a subject or see the idea and think, I can take it to this extent, but then we want Imagine to come in and take it to a whole new level. So it totally depends. But I think that, of course, the more access and the more research and the more thinking you can do before pitching a project, the better. I also think there's got to be passion for it. Why are we telling this story right now? There's been a lot of documentaries, and there's a lot of documentaries to come. We live in a big world, but a lot of things have been made already. So what's the new way to tell a story that we need to know, or a story that we didn't know we needed to know?
That's so good. And in your experience, you get pitched stuff, maybe you fall, I don't know how it works, so correct me if I'm wrong. You pitch something, you love this idea, and it just flops. Like, do you still have like those like moments of like disappointment where it's like, how did that not work?
Of course. Unfortunately, you never lose that. You can have total passion and you can make a bulletproof pitch and you can have an amazing team and awesome research and great subjects, and you can really see it. I feel lucky that I work on a team with others. So, I can have conviction in something, but if my colleagues don't see it, then that's a different perspective and it's really informative. I think when we all see something and we feel really strongly and then it doesn't hit in the marketplace, it's a huge bummer. You put a lot of work into these projects and you really hope that you can sell them. But at the end of the day, you do still have to sell them. So usually, we're lucky. It doesn't happen too often, but usually when it happens, we try to repurpose it. We try to find a different way into the story. But yeah, that's the catch about development. You put a lot of work and effort and investment, literally and also emotionally, into these projects. And sometimes there's a win and that's awesome. And in 2 years, you see it on Netflix and think, wow, I played a role in that. And sometimes you've been working on something for a year and then the market doesn't bite and that's the end of that. So it depends.
Lily, we've been talking a lot with other guests about women's intuition and how that plays a role in how a woman makes a decision. What is your take on intuition and how it's useful in your industry?
I think it's really important to trust your intuition. I think that people always pin women as overly emotional. So I think there's a fine line between trusting your intuition and then reacting emotionally. I think whether it's picking a story or picking a collaborator or just talking to someone, because you have a lot of intimate conversations in these industries, you do need to be able to trust your intuition and your gut on, is this a good story? I only know so much, but does it seem like a good story? Is this a good person? Does this person's perspective feel salient? Can I trust this person? I think it's really important, especially in an industry that kind of takes on fact and fiction and blurs them sometimes. I think that's majorly necessary to have that gut check with yourself, without also making it too emotional, so that you can still kind of have a clean view of the surroundings, if that makes sense.
100%.
From a career standpoint, are you using your gut more and more? Like, hey, to something, we don't have to go into it because I know your feet are where they're at right now and you're focused on everything you do, but you have a vision for your life. Have there been moments where you're like, I took a left here and I trusted that, and it's obviously part of the path? Like, are you starting to feel that in your career? See,
Definitely.
We noticed early on talking to these super successful women that they would say, in my 20s and 30s, I had these same intuitions, but I didn't learn to trust them until 40 and 50. And then you see this J curve at 40 and 50 in their life where they explode, like literally presidents of major companies that have been part of this. Yeah. And it's like, we want to accelerate that for women. Like, hey, emotions and esoteric ideas like intuition get a bad rap, but they're the more successful people we bump into, they know like, oh, if I hadn't turned left here, which I did on a whim, it seems, then I don't end up in some of these spots. Are you experiencing some of that in your career so far?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think the younger, and I'm really just starting out in a sense. I'm young, and I think that the younger you can trust your intuition, the better, because truly you're going to find whatever path you take to be beneficial, even if it doesn't lead to where you wanted it to lead. But certainly I've had experiences where, when I was younger, I almost took a job out in LA and I thought that was the best. And then I ended up staying in New York and I thought, wow, this is going to derail my career. And it absolutely did not. And I never would have been at HBO if I had gone the other way. And I'm so happy that I did, but I had no control. It's sort of, you gotta trust that the process is going to move you as it will, and that you can learn from any experience you have, because it's truly what you make of it. Like going back to the mailroom, I think there's some people who think that that job is below me, but when you're just out of college, that's the job, right? You've never worked before. You've worked internships maybe. So just trusting that the moves you make are the moves you wanted to make because you made them, hopefully, and they will have, a lasting benefit to your career, no matter where it takes you.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. We, Rudy and I have a theme because of how we grew up, and we were always the class clowns, very low GPA guys, not taking too much of life serious. But I do believe we both knew that it was going to work out and no one else could see it. But through that, we've kind of taken this jovial experience or spirit through very serious environments. I come from finance. I work in professional sports now. He's obviously in film. But we have a no asshole rule. Like, you can't be a jerk and work with us. And I think that's important. I think it's harder for women. Like, how are you able, you're in a tough business. How are you able to stand up for yourself? Like, there's a difference between being a jerk and like standing up for yourself. Is that a learned skill that you've processed, or were you kind of naturally like, all right, this person's a jerk and I don't take it personal? I'd love to see how you approach that, because I know it comes up in your world probably more than mine. You got a lot of high achievers with big egos.
Totally. And that's actually the thing that really no education can prepare you for, the people and the egos. I think your skin thickens, so to speak, every year that you're in this job. And I think it's really hard not to take things personally. You just have to be persistent and relentlessly committed to what you want to do. And whether it's advocating for a project, or whether it's dealing with someone your superior that is challenging you, or a team that doesn't see your vision, you've really just got to be committed to what you think is right. And it's hard. It's really hard. And I think that most women, I imagine, struggle with this. And it's, to me, we're all just trying to do the best we can. And if you can put on sort of a strong front, so to speak, to just get through whatever's challenging you, I think it's really normal to feel the things you feel internally, because if you're in this job, if you're in any job that you're passionate about, it means, you are passionate about it. And that with passion comes the ups and downs. But I think that you just have to really push yourself harder than you probably ever thought you could, to not take things personally and to achieve the goal. And everything else is just sort of, ancillary when you're looking at a goal that you've set for yourself.
Thank you. So you've actually, what's cool about your story is many of them, when we bumped into, haven't had your experience with the early mentors and leaders and some of that stuff. Are there times now where are you surrounded by people that have the answer you're going to need, or are you still expanding your network and bumping into stuff where they're like, you know what, Lily, that she's probably a better person for this? Like, you've had success, and I think some women or girls tend to forget that it's ongoing. The women we admire still get coached up and still have mentors and still are learning the same way any of us do. But I think with women, I believe it's an advantage that just, I don't know, biologically, there's this more communal aspect sometimes, especially in competitive environments. Do you feel like the scarcity of the job, where there's not a ton of women in the room, affects mentorship, or have you found like you've been pretty much able to get the mentoring you need?
I think that, a little bit of both. The scarcity of women in the field is really apparent. I actually have to say, though, documentary films specifically does have a lot more women than to be expected. So I feel it a little less than I think maybe other fields, just a tad. But I think that the thing about mentorship that is so tricky, I've been really lucky because, as we know, I've worked for really wonderful people, but I think that what I've learned is that no one has all the answers, because usually if you are mentored by a woman in this industry, they're the woman who came up with those answers because they didn't have that. So it's interesting. My mentor actually did have a mentor who was a woman. I know that's incredibly rare, but that being said, if your mentor is a successful woman, that woman doesn't have enormous time to spend bringing you along. They can give you the insight they have, but then you really have to figure it out. So it's less about getting the answers and more about finding them within your own experience. That goes back to trusting your gut. I think when you hit a certain level, you can ask for approval, you can ask for guidance, but there's no how to. You really have to just figure it out. And my job, I sort of originated this job because I came over when we started the group. So in some ways, I feel like I have a wonderful team that I can ask, how would you do this? Or what would you respond to this? But at the same time, it's really on me to just decide. And I've already made the relationships and I've already worked on the project. So, I have to just act. So that really does go back to trusting yourself, and mentors are incredible. And I highly recommend trying to find one, but knowing how competitive and how busy the field is, with a mentor also comes, the responsibility of trying to actually follow in their footsteps and make decisions independently.
Nice. So one of the things we talk to every guest about is people, I don't know why this is, and I don't have the POV of it, because I always just knew that it was hard for everybody who won. I don't know why, maybe from growing up in the project, I just assumed like, oh, it's hard for everybody. I know there's people that think, oh, everybody started on third base, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But when you're in a situation where you have doubt or negative self-talk, or something didn't go your way, and maybe it's something that there's no immediate fix, you're going to have to live in it for 5 months or $500,000 or whatever. People don't think high achievers have self-doubt. I always knew they did. When you have self-doubt or these negative talks, if that still comes up, like, what's that process like for Lily?
Yeah, of course, everyone has self-doubt. I think anyone who projects that is just projecting. Everyone has self-doubt to some extent. What is that process? It's really hard. I mean, I've definitely been in that situation many, many times. And I think that it's all part of the process. And you have to remember that when the wins come, when you feel, a great reward, it's wonderful. And that's part of it. And then when you feel something was lost or misunderstood or not received, or an opportunity you didn't get, that's also part of it. So it's sort of balancing the good with the bad, but you got to just think bigger than that. Those things usually are circumstantial and in the moment, and usually aren't going to be the things to totally derail, your career, your life, your goals. So you got to keep it in perspective, although it's easier said than done.
I love that. That might be the best answer we've had to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. If you don't get where you're going, it probably wasn't one decision. It's probably a series of things.
Right.
And sometimes it is bad luck. I'm so honest about, I've been very lucky. It's funny you mentioned the mailroom. Somebody said, hey, can someone go get coffee early on in my career? And I went and did it. And becoming friends or useful to that group was a monumental thing that happened to me. And it looks like maybe I did some of this stuff, but I tell people all the time, that was a part of it. Me and my buddies that grew up in our neighborhood, we cut grass, and my buddy had a lawnmower, but he was shy, so he wouldn't go knock on the doors, and I hated that. But that skill, I mean, it's changed Angela and I's life. Our kids will live a different life than we did because I had to get used to knocking on the door. So I love that you have that perspective. It's probably circumstantial. It's you do all this work, and one little thing doesn't knock you off of that. I'm interested in, and we'll be wrapping up here. Angela usually asks people about a question, especially in competitive industries, like about family and what your plans are for that. So feel free to share that or not when she gets to that. But I'm really interested if you can share, what has been the thing you've worked on, whether it's now or with HBO or Imagine, doesn't matter, where you're like, oh, I know I helped push that over. And I know ego makes you want to be team and all that stuff, but we know that there's some things where it's like, thank gosh, I did this piece of it, and this other person got to see the reward, or the audience got to see the reward. Have you had one of those moments where you're like, I know I was a part of that, that got this out to the people?
Yeah. We have a series coming out in a few months. I believe it's been announced. It's about a very famous jewel thief who in 1964 stole the crown jewel of India from the Museum of Natural History. And then he actually went on to commit a grisly murder. And then he went to jail. He got out of jail because he found God and then was a minister. He was a very elusive fellow. And in my first year of the job at Imagine, my boss asked me to find him. And I found him, and it took a minute because he had a very common name and there wasn't as much information about him as there is now. And I asked for a meeting and he said, well, I'm not going to come to New York, but you can come to Florida and I don't want to do a documentary. So I thought, like, this is a challenge that I just probably will not win. He doesn't want to do a documentary. I doubt that I'm going to go to Florida. The next day I was on a flight to Florida. I took him out to lunch and we sat for 5 hours. And by the end, he said, I'll do the documentary.
Aww.
And so it was getting that access that kind of set off what this documentary could be. And he's obviously the main subject. And he was the only person from Imagine I was the only person from Imagine who he had met because he was located in Florida. We were in New York and LA, our director's in LA. So I do feel I was integral in the process because I got that access to him and kind of learned his story to be able to set us up to pitch something that made sense and was entertaining.
I love that as another one of these lessons for everybody, but particularly for women, which is, and it's part of that go-getter creed and ethos, but let people make the decision. You get on the plane and go down and try to build a relationship with you. And if it's still no, he'll tell you no. But right. I find many of the women I work with who have been successful, one of the main things I see transition last is letting other people make the decision on if they're going to help them or not, work with them or not, support them or not. Like sometimes I think because of the way society is set up, women don't want to ask for the help. They don't want to ask for the raise. They don't want to ask for the promote. You're getting stifled down from all these directions. And also sometimes it's like, oh, they won't be interested in that, or that's not a good idea. And so many of them that I've met and we've talked to on this, they've had those moments where they broke through and it's like, just go get on the plane, meet the guy. And you can't control anything more than that.
Right.
All you can control is not making the decision that, oh, he said no directory or no documentary and I'm in the documentary biz. There's obviously a mismatch. That is so cool. And I love that I love the theme here, ladies and gentlemen, or anybody watching, is to be a participant in the success. Like just go do the work and see it out. Angela, do you want to wrap us up here and we'll get Lily Kaplan back to her? Maybe, are you on vacation right now? Are you relaxing?
No, I'm hanging out with my family, okay, but still working.
Awesome. We'll get back to family time.
I wish.
Which brings up a interesting question that I ask of any woman that I'm interviewing. And you're a successful woman and maybe you want to have a family, maybe you don't, whatever that path is. What advice would you give to anyone in your industry or trying to be a successful woman in any industry when is the right time to maybe think about starting a family, or like, how do you break from focusing solely on your career to multitasking of, hey, I want to start a family, but I still want to be successful?
Yeah, it's the eternal question for women. I think about it a lot, as do my friends. I don't think there's a right time, but what I will say, this is sort of personal, but I think a lot of people, I think the world is generally set up so that women, if you go to college and you graduate college, you're then sort of focusing on who will I marry and how will I start a family and what's work. And I think, luckily for me, being raised by my parents and going to school in New York and being, at a women's college, et cetera, you have the opportunity to kind of rethink that. So while you can still have your personal life and, you maybe who you want to start a family with, maybe, you don't want that, et cetera. I had a little bit of an easier time focusing on work in my early 20s. Not that I didn't focus on other things, but that was really where I was putting my effort because I had kind of the faith that if I could get that done, I could focus a lot more freely on, having a family when the time came, because I was, 22 when I graduated college and I wanted that later. So I think then the question is, at what point do you do that? And I think it's, it depends on who you meet. It depends on what you want to do. But I think it's important that if you do want that, you do put time and energy into it, because it's really easy when you have a job like this or have a competitive job that you really love to just focus on it exclusively. And while I think that's admirable in some respects, I think it's really important to have a life beyond that. And if you want to, start a family, I think as soon as you're comfortable in work and as soon as you feel like you've established yourself, it is a good time because people understand, and people hopefully want that for you too if you're working with good people. So, to each their own.
For sure. Well, we love it. Hey, we remind everybody the whole goal of this is to demystify the process of what women who have gotten competitive industries or high achieving women in general do to get through that. We have mysteriously found Lily's, I believe, Instagram or some sort of social media, so we will tag her in this. I'd love you to follow along. And what we really want is just to remind you that literally you can't be stopped. I mean, there are circumstantial things, but just if you should approach life from the standpoint that being a woman is not something that should stop you. There are high achieving women all over the place that had to go and start at the bottom, start at the mailroom, and work their way through it, and work their way through the confidence piece of it too. So we'd love you to hit like and subscribe and share this with all your friends and family. Lily, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us. We love Imagine Entertainment. We're biased. We love what you guys are working on there, and I thank you for sharing a bit of your story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.